This video is going to be the basics of procedures or functions in Python. So a procedure is basically a way to write code that works differently depending on the data input. Okay, so an easy way to see this is to sort of compare it to how things are done in math. But you know functions in math. You have an input, and depending on the input, the output will change. And inside here, there's a process, some procedure, function, and what that actually does underlying it is not necessarily of interest. And we put it in a black box because in programming, you don't really care how it does what it does. Once you write your own procedure or function, you're not going to really go back to it. You're just going to use it as long as it's appropriate. So if you think about in math, when you do a Cartesian coordinate system based on some input x, it is a different output y. And you can graph that in 2 dimensions anyway. It's basically the same idea. In programming, there are some differences, but for right now, we're not going to worry about that. So if we go to our coding environment, we've already used some built-in procedures in Python. So int, float, string. And before we get into those and reviewing how you use them again, let's just review data types. So in Python, you have some primitive data types. And the first one is the integer. The next is a float. Those are 2 number data types. There are a few others in Python. Then you have the string. And we've done booleans. And then the final primitive data type is none. But we won't worry about that right now. So you know that if you have a number, just call it n equals 9, and you want to convert that into a string, you can say, just put str, that's calling the function, the built-in function, you put n in there. And if we print out the data type, another built-in, and we run this code, it tells us that that value is converted into a string. So we take in the integer, you just plug it in the str function, and you get back, the type you get back is a string. And vice versa. If you have a string and you want to convert it into an integer, you could say, let's say n string equals n integer, just to give it some name. And you could say int n string, right? And if you print out the type, let's just borrow this, and we'll replace that and run it. Now we have the integer type. All it does is change it from this just changes it from a string to an integer, and this changes it from an integer into a string, right? Because oftentimes, your data is going to come in as a string, and you have to be able to, if you're going to do mathematical operations on it, you have to change it. So that's a convenience built-in feature that Python provides. And I could convert this to a float as well. And now if I run this, you can see it changes it to a float. And what would that mean? Well, let's just print the value. It's not an integer anymore. And if I ran this, now you can see it doesn't give us 9 as an integer, it gives us 9.0. So anyway, there's some of those built-ins. But let's look at some of these other built-ins. So we've done len for length. It returns the length of an object. The argument, well, typically we've used it for strings, but it can be used for other things as well, which we will get into. But if we go back to our code and we say, let's get rid of this, and we just say we have some string, we'll call it name equals Fred, and Fred Flintstone, one of the greatest characters ever, and we want to know the length of that, right? We would use len and stick the string in there. And if I ran this, it tells me it's got 14, there are 14 spaces in here. So, what other ones? Let's see here. We've certainly used print. I'm using print all the time to print to the console, right? That's a built-in. And you don't care how it operates. It can get quite complex to print to the console. You don't care. It's one line command. You just put in the different data you want to print out inside the parentheses here. And depending on what you put in those parentheses, different things will come out, right? Let me see. Let me see if there's another one here I want to cover. Bool, absolute value. Some of these, we're going to use more of these, but we'll break it off here for right now. There's the idea is not that to go through the litany of built-in functions, but it's to convince you that they're easy to use, and they provide the ability to change output based on different inputs.